In this video tutorial, we're going to step through a simple but fun setting up of a material that applies a wireframe shader over top of an asset that we also have the ability to control where it's visible through our Vertex painting. So let's go ahead and jump in. So for this particular setup here, we've got a simple one on the right, which is static, doesn't have this kind of shimmer effect. And then we've got a more complex one on the right. Now, to start with, we're actually going to go with the simple one, but we will kind of cover later kind of augmenting this material to be able to do some cool effects. Now, if you want to just jump straight to that advanced one, in the description, I actually have the link to the time code with that, which you guys should know from previous videos, so you can go to that. So for starters, let's go ahead and just kick off with the simple material. Okay, so for the simple wireframe material, we're just going to start by right-clicking, and let's create a new material. Do M for master, so dash M for master, and we'll say wireframe, and we'll just keep it that. Now, we will be setting up an actual master material for this, so we can control things like coloration, the color of it, and as you'll see later with the advanced one, being able to do some additional effects with that. So we'll go ahead and double click and open this, and let's get started. So there's a couple parameters that we want to change before we start building things. So if we click on the actual material itself, the domain, there's a couple of things we want to change. The first is our blend mode. We want to change it to translucent. Now, if we change it to mask, you can see here we have opacity mask, but with opacity mask, it's either on or off. It's either black or white, so you don't have anything in between. So if you want it just to appear or not appear, you could do that. But in this case, I want to actually use translucent. What translucent is going to do is allow me to have a gradation of where that stuff is visible, right? So I can paint more or less and kind of blend it in between, which I think is a little bit better looking. So that's the first thing. Our blend mode is to translucent. We'll change it to two-sided. So again, because it's going to be a transparent material, we want to be able to see it through both sides. And then the third and final step is this. So if you go underneath the material and you expand this show advanced, which from previous videos I had mentioned too, that Epic loves hiding some really cool features and tools inside of these little things. So if we click this show advanced, underneath we're going to activate wireframe. So as soon as I click that, you see now we've got that wireframe material we're looking for. So let's go ahead and save it. And we'll start building a couple other things that we want to. So the first thing we want is our base color. So I can right click and I can do vector, which should be constant 3 vector, or I can hold down 3, click, and there's our vector. So let's go ahead and this will be our color. I'll change it to something like this really nice fuchsia. We'll do okay, and we'll plug it into our base color, and there we go. Cool. We've got our actual coloration on there. And the next thing we want to do is to be able to control our opacity, which from the intro we said that we want to control that with our red vertex. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to type vertex color, and I'm going to use the red channel output as my opacity. So I'll go ahead and save this. I'll wait for that to do. And if you remember too, because we're setting it up as a master material, I want to expose some of these parameters. So the color, I want to be able to change it with multiple variations. So right click, convert to parameter, and call it color. Now, if you don't see this here, I'll show you here. Under Windows, you've got parameter default, which it may pop up here on your details panel. Just simply tear it off. The parameters default is going to show you what your instance materials will look like. Now, if you want more information on the instances and creating master materials, I've got another longer video to cover that. But for those of you that are aware of it, this is what's going to be exposed on your instances. You can see it as you build it, which is super handy, by simply clicking Window, Parameter Defaults, and you'll have that tab. So let's go ahead and save it. And you'll see that this will now update instead of none. It will say color. So there we go. So that's the start of our basic material. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to right click and I'm going to do create material instance. And let's just call this fuchsia simple. In fact, let me, I'll make this easy so as we're going along. I'm going to change the name of the wireframe to simple, since again, we're going to create a complex one later down. Okay, so we've got our fuchsia. So first thing I want to do here is, now I set this up just a little bit ahead of time so you didn't see, but I've got this Bone 3 base and Bone 3 wireframe. They are literally the exact same mesh, right? They're just stacked on top of each other. So if we look at their details down here, they're the exact same. But I want to take this wireframe one and go ahead and apply my material instance to it. And we'll click escape so we can see it, and there we go. So now we have the wireframe showing up on top. And if I click my wireframe as well, go underneath your paint options, select colors for your vertices, and I'm going to go ahead and let's just show RGB channels, right? It's pure white, so I know that I'm going to control the visibility with my black color. So I'm going to unclick my green, my blue, my alpha, since we're only using the red channel. There's my brush. I can use the bracket keys or scale the radius here. I don't want to paint in white. If you press X, it'll flip between your erase and paint color. And let me go ahead and just toggle RGB. And let's say that I'm just going to hide it here. So take our strength at 1. There we go, paint on the mesh. Maybe I'll do some up here as well. And then we'll exit by clicking here. I'll press escape. And there we go. So we can see the vertex masking applying here, because where we painted our red, it's no longer showing. So cool. Okay, so this is the start to our material. So we know it's working, but we need to take a little step further. So let's move on to the next step, which is adjusting the world position offset. So with world position offset, it begs the question, why do we want to use that? Well, there's one very particular reason for that. So if we look at our mesh here in our wireframe, both of those meshes are stacked perfectly on top of each other, which in most cases may work, but then you're going to start having some Z fighting, right? Because they're both occupying the same space. The engine may not know which one's supposed to be on top. So with it, I want to create an offset, right? Like I want to push that wireframe slightly off the surface. Now, if I use, say, for example, scaling, so I'll select my wireframe here and scale it up. I'm going to exaggerate a little bit so we can see what's happening. If we look at where the horns are at, right, you've got quite a considerable distance between where I just scaled the mesh up and the underlying mesh. But if we look down near the bottom, like the teeth, it's not that far off. So it's scaling from the pivot point, which may not give me the offset that I need. So what we're going to do with that is do it through, to control that through world position offset. So I'm going to go ahead, actually we'll just undo here so we can get it back to where it was scaled. And let's go ahead and jump into our master, not the instance, but we'll double click the master. And let's go ahead and we'll set up this world position offset. So I'll move these guys off a little bit. And the first thing that I want to do is right click, and I want to do object and get object position, which is our world space. Right click again, type in world, and get my world position. So from that, what I'm going to do is pull off here and do subtract. I'm going to subtract our object position from the world position. So to explain this here real quick in simplistic terms, I'm not taking the object's pivot point as the positional offset. I'm taking wherever the object exists in the actual world, and I'm subtracting from that to get me my center location. So again, it's not using the pivot point, it's using the center point of our actual mesh. So okay, so we've got that information now, but now what I want to do is be able to control that, right? This is our master. So I'm going to take this off and I'm going to do a multiply node. There we go. And I'm going to hold down 1 to create a scalar. This is going to be the parameter we use to control it. Drag it up to here. We'll right click, convert to parameter, and call it our WPO. Actually, we'll just use that. So it'll be a world position offset, and we'll plug it into here. We'll go ahead and save it. So we can see from our parameter default window that we now have this WPO. We'll go and close this. And then let me open our instance, which is driving from that master. And there we go. Now we got our WPO. So if I click this, let's kind of see what's happening here. And I scale this up, I scale it down. You can see it's now scaling appropriately. Now granted, we've got these really fine numbers, right? Like it looks like it's got a big offset in the engine, but I'm at 0.03. So a way that we can kind of make that a little bit easier, a little bit more friendly is let's jump back to our master material. And in here, I'm going to take our WPO and I'm just going to inject another thing, which is divide. And what I want to divide by is, let's say 10. So it's going to take it 10 more decimal points, move it up, right? Kind of makes sense. I'll show you here. So let's go ahead and save this. We'll jump back to our material instance. And we'll scale this off a little bit. So now if I do it, you can see that it's now using much more friendly, right? 0.3 as as opposed to 0.003. So that makes it easy. So I can reset this real quick, and let's say I'll do -0.1, and now we've got it slightly pushed off of the mesh the way that we want to. Or I can take it down, we'll do 0.01. And now that it's slightly protruding, we're no longer going to have that Z fighting. That makes it easy. So we'll save that example, and that should be it. If we jump back real quick and just take a look at our master material, what we have here, we've got the ability to change the color, and we've got this positional offset, which is down here, and we also have this. In fact, let me just go ahead and comment. So one position offset. And we've got our vertex color, which allows us to also go in and mask out where we want it. So that's the simple setup, which is great, and that could work great for showcasing things or just having a general wireframe. But let's take it a step further. Let's actually make this kind of a cool shimmer effect. So let's dive into that right now. For this second half, we're going to do a slightly different variation of this material where we're going to add an emissive parameter to it, and we're also going to add a kind of masking effect, a world position masking effect, to be able to change the way that it looks and kind of create this little shimmer effect, which I think is kind of cool. And should be fun. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate. So I'll right click and I'll duplicate my material simple, and let's just call this material complex, because we're going to use the kind of the same structure but just augment a little bit. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll double click it. We'll open up inside, and then let's go ahead and start adding our new parameters. So the first thing I had mentioned is we want to do, we want to have emissive parameters. So I'm going to pull off my color. I'm going to go and drag off this and do multiply, and then I'm going to drag off, and we'll do, well, actually I'll just press 1 and left click, right click this guy, and we'll call it our emissive, and then we'll plug this into here, and then plug this value into our emissive color. So I'll go ahead and save that, and we'll wait for that to do. So if I take this emissive, let's say default, I'll do like 100, right? So now we get this, our wireframe actually projecting kind of an emissive value, which is cool. So we'll go ahead and set that back to 0, and we'll leave everything else to 0 so we can control it however we need to. Let's go ahead and comment this, and we'll say this is our base color and emissive. So there we go. Okay. Next thing is that we want to add some additional masking effects with it. In the intro, you kind of saw that there was kind of the shimmer effect that's happening, but we want that in world space that's just kind of moving this black and white texture. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So with this one, we'll just breeze right through. We'll add all the nodes, and I'll explain later. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to do type in world. We want our absolute world position. I'm going to mask that, which should be component mask. We want our red and green. Reason for that is we're doing UV coordinate space in absolute world position, so we're going to move it. Yeah, we'll go with that. We'll come off of here. We'll do a divide, and from our divide, we want to do two separate controls. We want to be able to control our texture moving in the U direction and the V direction separately, right? Because we don't want it just uniformly going. We want it to look kind of variation with that. So to do that, I'm going to press number 1, left click once, left click twice, select both of those, convert to parameters, and this one will say U direction, and in this one we'll say V direction, and that'll get our 2. So with those, we'll go ahead and drag off, and we'll do an append node, so append vector, because we want to pull those together, and we'll plug that into our divide. So that will be our U and V direction, which we'll see as in a little bit, and then we'll take that together with the absolute world position. We'll drag off of our divide and do a panner node, which is what's actually going to move our texture. And then let's also drag a texture in here. So we'll save this real quick. I will minimize this a little bit. So I've done a couple textures ahead of time. And we'll use this cloud pattern, right? So we want to kind of just shimmering across. So I'll drag this in here in our texture sample. We'll right click and we'll do convert to parameter. And this one will say mask texture. We'll plug our painter into the UV, so this is what's actually going to be moving it. And then finally what we want to do is we'll drag off of our color and we'll do a power node. Press 1 for our single scalar, right click on this one and call this mask power. And all we're simply doing here with this power node is increasing the contrast. So if I do a preview, figure out what's happening here real quick. Oh, I know what's happening here. Our default U and V, we actually need to have a value in there. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to push 150 in this, and that should be good. Okay, and we'll make sure we've got everything set up. Coordinates, cloud power, and then we'll come up here and we'll set this default value to 1. There we go. So now we should be able to see our actual texture. So if I take this mask power and I increase this to say like 2, you'll see we get a much higher contrast, right? So wherever it's white, it'll be visible. Wherever it's black, it'll be hidden. So we'll leave this at 1, which is just going to use the values from the texture. Stop viewing that. And then finally what we want to do is multiply it with our vertex color. So I'm going to pull off this vertex, click multiply, plug in our base to this, and then we'll plug this into our opacity. Okay, so to recap real quick, everything that's happening here, right? So we've got our existing vertex color. So we want to be able to go in by hand and say, I don't want this wireframe to show here. So we still have that ability. But globally, we have this kind of noise texture that's floating across the surface to give us some variation. So within that, because we're using absolute world position, it's going to just float through the world. So it'll carry that variation. We're masking it to get our UV coordinates, that's the R and G. We're setting these two values here to be able to control how fast it goes this way and how fast it goes this way. And then finally, we put that all together in the painter node, which is what's going to move it for us. It's going to move this texture. And then finally, what we have is this mask power, which gives us just some additional control to be able to increase the contrast, decrease the contrast to give us more variation. Multiply it all together, and now we have our opacity. So let's go ahead and I'm going to select this, and I'm going to comment this and say masking. So we have it, and we'll save this guy, and then let's go ahead and start playing with and seeing what this looks like in our example. So I'm going to go ahead and select this bone wireframe 3, go back to our materials, and under our wireframe complex, I'm going to right click and create material instance, and we'll say complex. Actually, we'll do blue complex, and then let's go ahead and see this guy. We'll open it. I'll move him off here, and then for our bone 3, we'll go ahead and assign this to him. So now we've got our complex. I'll press escape, and let's go ahead and make sure that everything's working. So if I've got my emissive, right, I can increase this. There we go. So now we can see it taking effect. I'll change my color. Let's say that, I'll make it something blue. So there we go. Now I can see it. World position offset, we'll say -0.01. Actually, we'll just leave it there. And then let's figure out why we're not getting our panning here. So missed a critical step in this one in what we're kind of just stepping through here. Figured out why this texture isn't right. Like we've kind of got the shimmer effect happening, but it's not moving, right? It's because we forgot to plug something in the actual speed. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and hold down 1, left click, convert this parameter, and call this WPO speed. And we'll plug this guy into our speed, and let's go ahead and give him just a default value of say like 0.2. And there we go. So now we're fixed. So if we go back, we'll close our blue complex. We should be going here, and we've got our WPO speed, and let's go ahead and assign him. So I'm going to click our, there it is, our blue complex. We'll select our bone 3 wireframe. Blue complex is assigned to him, and we'll jump back and let's start adjusting some parameters just to see a little bit better. So I'm going to take my emissive, I'm going to crank this up to like, let's say like, we'll go 50 and just kind of take a look at that. Okay, so a little bit. I'll take a U direction. Let me do 250 on this guy. Maybe 300 here. WPO speed. I'm going to increase this to say like, let's go. Yeah, we'll do 1. Kind of figure out what's happening here. Our texture. Let's increase our power a little bit. There we go. So we're getting much higher contrast. So we'll go 2. Let's maybe go 3. There we go. And we'll slow it down. Okay. So there we go. Now we've got our shimmer effect happening, which kind of gives us a look that we want. In kind of this last bit, let's just see what kind of variations we can get with this master. So I'll go ahead and save this guy, and then we'll see what we can do. So finally, right, we've created this master material, but let's see if we can do some different effects with it. So I'm going to go ahead and take my 2 guys that I have here. I'm going to move them. Let's go ahead and just duplicate them a little bit, and we'll offset, and we'll maybe do like 1 or 2 little variations on this one. I'll take this guy and I'll hide him in the back so you don't see him. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate, which I can right-click, duplicate. We'll do blue. Let's do green, complex. There we go, and we'll select this middle guy here. So that's, I believe this, on 2 wireframe, yep. So we'll assign the green complex to him. Double click, let's go in here, and I'll click off of him. Let's change our color, just to see, there we go. I'll bump up my emissive. Let's go even higher, let's go maybe like, we'll do like 150. And let's see if we can change like this mask power, right? To give us something really kind of cool looking. Then U direction, what if we go like 1,000? What do we get here? Let's say V direction is 0. What does that kind of look like? Okay, maybe we'll need probably a value of like 1. So there you go. Maybe not quite what we're looking for. We'll take this down, say 500. Let's do like 250. And we do need to increase this a little bit just so it's slightly off the surface. In fact, let's do that, kind of like a hologram, right? So yeah, -0.1. That looks pretty good. Okay, so there's our green. Nothing fancy. Okay, I'm going to duplicate him, and then let's just call this, we'll call this red. Red complex. And then let's assign him to this guy here on the left. So bone 3, go red complex. Open him up. I'll go ahead and press escape so we can see what's happening here. And we're going to change the color. Let's say like a real vibrant red. Yeah, this should be pretty easy to see. Maybe we'll go a little bit pink so we can see what's happening here. And instead, let's go ahead and change this masking texture. Now, I created a couple examples, but let's see what we get if we do this kind of barcode pattern, right? Like just basically just some vertical lines, right? And we're moving in that U direction. Let's go ahead and change this. Maybe we'll do like 750, right? So it's faster. Maybe we'll go like 1,000, right? So now we kind of get this almost kind of like a transmat scanning effect, which is kind of cool. So we'll save that guy, and maybe we increase the emissive to get us something really vibrant. It's probably a little too much. So there we go. WPO speed, maybe we go 0.1, so it's like a slow scan. Maybe we go 0.5, make it faster. And again, all this stuff in here too. So if I select my, let's go back to our bone 3 mesh. I'll go into here, check my weight. So see, we're still inheriting those vertex colors, but because it's per mesh, I can go ahead and let's just, let's say paint color. I'm going to switch those by pressing X. So get white, and I'm just going to go ahead and fill it. And then let's see. There we go. So that's a little bit better. Let me see too. I'm gonna do the same thing with these guys. So we'll fill those so we can see the full effect without it being painted. So we'll save that. There we go. And we'll exit out of here. So it goes back to our game mode. And there we go. Using this kind of wireframe blended, you can see that by creating this little master material that we have and doing some variations, really gives us some cool effects. And by simply going in and just changing out our actual masking pattern, we can get some really cool effects. And then if you remember as well from both in our simple and our complex, we have this vertex color, which is controlling. So per instance, we can go in and we can determine, again, by going into our paint colors, we'll go, so we'll just visualize our RGB, painting in just the red. We'll press X to switch here, which will get us black, and we can paint whatever we don't want to show. So if I wanted it just say on this little portion here, we'll exit out of there. And then it should mask everything off for us so we don't see it. Now again, I was painting with some semi-transparency, but go in there, make it hard values, and there we go. So I hope you guys enjoyed that tutorial. I know it was kind of more specifically focused on using vertex painting, but maybe there's some cool little tricks you guys can do here for some really lightweight and neat effects. So hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching.